Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 387. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. It is Wednesday, December 3rd. Yes, it's only Wednesday. I'm coming to you today from Northern California, USA. I made it out of the snowpocalypse and the storm that's hit much of America, and I'm on the West Coast for a short one to talk about the growing power of our independent veterans movement, which will be perfect today because our guest coming up is a returning champion, Senator Angus King, the only real independent in the Senate. He's from Maine. He's always a voice of insight and reason. He's also a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he's coming up in just a minute. But before that, a lot is happening today and just in the last 24 hours. The latest on the boat strikes, Hegseth, and allegations of war crime. Yesterday, Hegseth said he did not see survivors of the boat attack clinging to the wreckage. Chris may be able to play a clip in here.
Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved in it.
A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do. And by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat.
But Hegseth also said, kind of patronizingly, this is called the fog of war. It's what you and the press don't understand. I want to make a note that there are a number of good defense journalists who are also combat vets, and they understand the fog of war. Folks like James Laporta, who's been a guest on this show, C.J. Shivers at the New York Times, Alex Horton at the Washington Post, one of the guys who's been reporting on this, and others. A reminder, too, only 29% of Americans say they support the military killings without the involvement of a court or judge. And the majority are still opposed. Some are unsure. They haven't struck a boat since November 15th, which I think is noteworthy. As of November 15th, at least 83 people have been killed, 21 strikes on 22 vessels. And some more related news, the family of a fisherman killed in a U.S. boat strike has filed a human rights complaint. The family of a Colombian fisherman who was killed on September 15th has filed a formal complaint with the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, alleging the government illegally killed him. We've got some more big news as Hegseth's worst week ever continues. The Pentagon Inspector General investigation into SignalGate is now complete. The report was reportedly given to the Secretary of Defense yesterday, a classified final version, and will be delivered to the House and the Senate Armed Services Committee for review. And a declassified, redacted version is set to be released publicly as early as tomorrow. I'll ask Senator King about that in just a minute. I think it's about damn time. The public needs to see it, and our troops especially need to see it. They need to know if they can trust the man leading them, and if he's held to a lower standard than they are. His rough week is about to get much rougher. There was also a very demented cabinet meeting at the White House where Trump called Somalis garbage. I think a new low of his continued insults on African people. He was unapologetic in some outright bigotry. J.D. Vance, the vice president, banged on the table in encouragement, but it was a bizarre cabinet meeting. Hegseth, of course, spoke. Kristi Noem thanked Trump for stopping hurricanes, and I think it was the most sycophantic cabinet meeting I've ever seen. Speaking of pathetic and sycophantic, the propaganda press corps had their first fake press briefing at the Pentagon. That means Laura Loomer, the My Pillow guys, Lindell TV, and disgraced former Congressman Matt Gaetz were asking questions instead of the standard press corps. A report on the National Guardsman who's been wounded, Andrew Wolf, is still showing positive signs. And a note, my friend Dan Moynihan, a respected non-first responder, noted that Trump, unless I'm wrong here, has still not ordered the flags in D.C. or nationwide lowered for the murdered National Guard soldier Sarah Beckstrom, specialist from the West Virginia National Guard. They lowered the flags for Charlie Kirk, but so far not from her, which I think is not okay. Speaking of not okay, attacks on Ukraine continued overnight. It's day 1378 of Russia's full-scale invasion. Putin met with Witkoff and Kushner yesterday for nearly 5 hours. No top-line results. I do think it's noteworthy that the president's son-in-law is how Kushner is listed in the New York Times because he has no official title. It's not our Secretary of State. It's not folks with official titles. It's potentially two real estate dudes. So meanwhile, Zelensky was not there. He was looking for support for European allies. Special results in the Tennessee election are making headlines. The Republican kept the seat. Matt Van Epps, he's a West Point graduate supported by Trump, got 53.9%. The Democrat, Afton Bain, who was not a moderate, got 45%. John Thorpe, the independent, who was on this show, coming in at less than 1%, but he did make the ballot and he did run. This is a district that Trump won by 22 points, and the Republican here won by a lot less. Billionaire Michael and Susan Dell pledged $6.25 billion to something they're calling a Trump fund for kids under 10 as an incentive to claim new investment accounts. We'll see more about that. And finally, in sports news, football rankings were released. No surprises. Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas Tech, and Oregon. And my Knicks lost a tough one on the road to the Celtics as New York's woes against Boston teams this week continues, which might make our guest today a little happy, being that he is from New England. But it's Wednesday, it's hump day, a lot to get through, and now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. Helping us stay vigilant, a man I am honored to have back on the program, a person who is right smack dab in the middle of all of the top news that we've been talking about for weeks and months on this show. Senator Angus King is an independent from Maine. He is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and maybe the biggest fan of the 20th Maine and General Chamberlain, Joshua Chamberlain, who once said, "Stand firm, ye boys from Maine." I think it's definitely a time to stand firm, not just boys from Maine, but boys and girls from across the country. Sir, the great and powerful Senator Angus King is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, sir.
Paul, it's great to be with you, and I just want to express my deepest sympathy for the Knicks having lost to the Celtics. I mean, I know that's hard for you guys, but those things happen. It's like the Red Sox beating the Yankees in the '04 playoffs. But my heart goes out to you. I just want you to know I feel your pain.
It's kind of like the Giants beating the Patriots every time they're in the Super Bowl, right, sir?
Yeah, well, so yeah, okay. The helmet catch, right? We've buried that piece of history.
Exactly. I mean, is everybody in Maine a Boston sports fan? I mean, there might be some outliers that are Yankee fans, but is everybody in Maine pretty much a Boston sports fan?
Pretty much. I mean, that's the kids grow up listening to the Celtics and the Red Sox on the radio, and that's in fact our minor league team, the Maine Sea Dogs, Portland Sea Dogs are our minor league affiliate of the Red Sox, and in the little stadium in Portland, actually they have a green monster in the left field. We're pretty much Boston.
I've been there. I love the Sea Dogs, love their merchandise. Their stadium is cool. I always recommend if folks go to Portland to try to check out a Sea Dogs game if you can. Sir, let me ground us in this moment. Where are you and how are you? There's a lot flying around. I'm grateful we have any time with you today, but where are you and how are you?
Well, I'm doing fine, although Jack Benny, the old comedian from the 50s, used to say when somebody asked him how he was, compared to what? And so that's my response right now. It's a pretty tough time, Paul. There's a lot flying around. There's a lot of difficulty. We're going to try to see if we can extend those ACA premium supports next week. That's tough going. And of course, the ongoing problems that we're seeing across the country and from this administration. I mean, you mentioned what the president said yesterday, characterized people from an entire country as garbage. We have Somali refugees in Portland. They're good citizens. They work hard. They support their families just like everybody else. They contribute to the economy. And you said he doesn't like African refugees. There's an exception. He likes white African refugees. He's a big deal is letting in refugees from white people from South Africa, supposedly subjects of persecution. I don't know with the facts on the ground, but it's a little hard to take when you call one set of people from Africa garbage and the other people you're welcoming, and on its face it looks like it has something to do with race.
Maine is such a especially welcoming place. I've seen that. There are these enclaves of immigrant communities all across the state. And he continues to do this. You are an independent. You're a true independent. I think you showed that recently when you voted, I think, with the Republicans to end the shutdown, which I think was important. I thought the shutdown needed to end. And you've always been independent. You've also been a person of integrity. Can I just ask you to address him and his tone and his speech, because it's nonstop? I mean, he called a woman piggy. He's calling Senator Kelly a traitor and using this hyper intense radioactive negative language, calling an entire country of people garbage. He said similar things about the Afghan people. This is hurting our image so profoundly around the world, and it's also hurting our country. Can you offer an alternative voice for folks who may be watching from around the world who want to hear from an American leader who doesn't talk like that?
Well, it doesn't represent America. I mean, ironically, America is a country other than the Native Americans who were already here. Everybody else are immigrants. All of us. I was at a naturalization ceremony a while ago, and I said, okay, everybody in the audience, there was this big audience who are either immigrants or the descendants of immigrants, raise your hand. And of course, everybody raised their hand. The African Americans were brought here against their will, but all the rest of the country came here as immigrants. And that's the neat thing about this country. It's based not on blood and soil, it's based on an idea. It's based on that sentence in the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. That was a radical notion in 1776 and is still radical around the world, that people were equal. It didn't matter who your father or mother was, and you'd had an opportunity to rise by your own merits. And that's what this country's all about. And to be demonizing people from other countries. Here's a guy, he's married to a person from another country. His mother, I think, came from Scotland. So, it's unfortunate. The other thing, Paul, that's very worrisome is that the rhetoric is encouraging violence. When you say a U.S. senator should be put to death, which is what he said death, that puts a target on him. And unfortunately, there are unbalanced people out there who will take that either as permission or as an order. And the death threats against members of Congress have risen tremendously in the last few years. And part of it is because we've got a leader who basically sort of off the top of his head makes threats like that, as I say, people can take as empowering to act. And we have all these cases around the country, the legislators up in Minnesota, Charlie Kirk. I mean, the president of the United States should be calming people down, not riling them up.
I think that is one of the most important points we need to reiterate, especially now. We also need to remind folks of our history and our shared values. And I think that's a good pivot as we jump into what I think is today's top topic. Sir, I say there are often topics, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. I think that everyone is now riveted on, I don't know what we call this, boat strike gate, but the question of illegal orders, the question of who is responsible, the question of whether or not war crimes were committed. On September, after the September 2nd strike, Hegseth said he watched the operation live. Yesterday, he said he only watched the first strike before going to other meetings. On the day of the strike, Rubio said drugs on the boat were probably headed to Trinidad. The next day, he said the boat was headed toward the United States to flood our country with poison. The story keeps changing, and more information continues to come out. Let me ask you, as someone who sits on the Armed Services Committee, what happens next? You are an independent. It's going to be important for you to flex the values that are beyond party and put country first. What happens next? And do you think Hegseth needs to resign now, regardless of how this turns out, just the way he's handled everything? Do you have any faith in his ability to lead our military after what is the latest, I think, disgraceful episode from him as a leader?
Well, you're talking to a guy who voted against his confirmation. He was not qualified and just rejected a lot of the basic values that we hold as Americans and as members of the military. You know this. You know about illegal orders. I think we need to get to the facts. I mean, the law is clear, and we'll talk about the law, but we need to get to the facts. What was Hegseth's order? And whether was there a second order to take the second strike? What did the admiral, what were his orders? What did he order? And the process, you said, what happens next? The process really starts tomorrow, where Admiral Bradley is going to be meeting with the leaders of the Intelligence Committee and I believe the Armed Services Committee to answer some of those questions. Now, I think the next step ought to be public hearings. There's nothing classified about this. We ought to know what the order was, when it was given, what the timing was. By the way, I want to see Pete Hegseth's calendar that day because he said he had to go to a meeting. I'd like to know what the meeting was and how long. He said, well, it was an hour or two. How long was it between the two strikes? And there's been a lot of discussion about killing those survivors in the water. Paul, I happen to have the Department of Defense. This is one volume of 3 volumes of the Defense Department manual for the law of war, Department of Defense Law of War Manual. And section 18.3. 2.1 says this. This is all about illegal orders. And you're trained from the very beginning to not follow legal orders. What those senators and congressmen said was like saying the sun rises in the east. It's absolutely clear that you not only have no obligation to follow illegal orders, you must not follow illegal orders because following orders is not a defense. We learned that at Nuremberg. Following orders that are illegal is not a defense. You're in trouble yourself. So here's what the Law of War manual, they're talking about the requirement to comply with, well, I'll read it to you. The requirement to refuse to comply with orders to commit law of war violations applies to orders to perform conduct that is clearly illegal or orders that the subordinate knows, in fact, are illegal. Now listen to this. For example, orders to fire upon the shipwrecked would be clearly illegal. In other words, what they did is in the Law of War manual as an example of an illegal order.
Yeah, I think it's a case study. We talked about this yesterday with Jason Dempsey. I mean, this is literally how you teach how not to do a war crime. Let me ask you a question that I don't think anyone has answered. Do you know why Admiral Holsey resigned? The former head of Southern Command resigned, and this has gotten some speculation. He was responsible for military operations in the Caribbean and South America. I think the public has a right to know. I think our troops have a right to know. But do you know why he resigned, and can you find out?
I do not know. I'm going to try to find out. I think now is the time for him to come forward if indeed his resignation had something to do with what he was being ordered or what he saw was happening. As you know, he served about a year of a 3-year billet, and his resignation is suggestive, but I don't have any answer to that. Paul, I want to go back though to the ship strike for a minute. There's been a lot of focus, and I just read the provision about shooting survivors in the water. There's no question that that's a violation. German U-boat commanders after World War II were tried for that, so there's no doubt about that. I want to focus on what was Hegseth's order. And it's been reported that his order was, quote, kill everybody. If that's the case, that in itself is an illegal order. The legal term, I mean, the old military term, is give no quarter. And give no quarter means kill everybody, no prisoners, no wounded. And that is a clear violation of the law of war, of the Geneva Convention, of the law in this country. So if Hegseth said, if what he is quoted as having said, and we don't know this yet, that's why I want to see Admiral Bradley answer some questions about what was his order. But if Pete Hegseth used the term kill everybody, that's an illegal order. And if he did say that,
and if he did, this is an important point that Jason Dempsey, the great military civilian scholar, brought up yesterday. I mean, Bradley will still be responsible, even if he was given that order, and he knows not to blow up, wounded people on a boat. There's no scapegoating here, right? Everybody in the chain of command is responsible. So we're now at Bradley. We've got Hegseth. We may find about subordinate folks, who were involved in the chain of command and maybe even on the teams that made the actual strike. I hope that comes out so folks understand that everyone is truly responsible for, especially in this case, knowing that would have been an illegal order. Let me ask you, sir, if we can shift to a related topic. I would say it's normally below the radar, but nothing is below the radar right now. But SignalGate is finally back. Hegseth got the report yesterday, the classified version of the Inspector General's report on his use of Signal to discuss sensitive, potentially classified information. I believe it was delivered to the House and Senate now. I don't know if you've seen it. And if you have, if you can share any reactions here on what we can look for, or what you want to see from this report.
Well, I haven't seen it yet. I'll probably see it in the next 24 hours, however, and I'm certainly anxious to see what it says. The first thing, though, Paul, these folks fired, I think, something like 18 inspectors general like the day after Donald Trump was inaugurated. The inspector general that issued this report is an acting inspector general. They still haven't hired or brought on a full-time. By the way, and the firings were illegal. They're supposed to be a 30-day notice to Congress and an explanation of why the firing. That never happened. So the firings themselves were illegal. The next thing they did was fire the top echelon of the legal officers in the Department of Defense, the top JAG officers, and then they transferred 600 JAG officers out of the Pentagon to be immigration judges. Now, if you follow the breadcrumbs, you You fire the inspector general, you fire the top legal officials, you fire 600 more JAG officers. That to me spells illegal orders might be coming. I mean, the pattern is hard to miss there. Why fire all the legal?
They've cleared the deck, right? I mean, we've covered this on this show, especially for months now. I mean, the table is set. They have cleared the deck. They've executed the purge. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs is gone. And on a parallel track, Venezuela, the table is now set, right? The naval assets are in place. It looks like he can go at any time. And by the time this show posts, we might have strikes on Venezuela. But let me come back to the question I asked you earlier, because I know you voted against him. But given that we might be at war with Venezuela, an escalated path any day now, do you think he should be removed immediately? Do you think this should happen now, given the escalation of what we need our Secretary of Defense to do, given the fact that he may be held to a lower standard than his subordinates? It feels like every day we have this guy in charge, he's compromised. And I wonder if you will call for him to be removed immediately, and if other senators will do the same.
Paul, you know that one of the things that you see in the military when somebody is in effect fired is they say lost confidence in his leadership ability or something to that effect. Clearly, that's the case. I don't think Pete Hegseth should have been the secretary in the first place, but I think he's demonstrated an inability to understand the gravity of the position that he's in. And here we are on the verge, what looks like a land war in Venezuela. You don't need 6 destroyers, an aircraft carrier, a nuclear submarine, 2,200 Marines, 15,000 other troops in the Caribbean neighborhood to interdict speedboats with drugs on them. And the president said, he said yesterday, sort of offhandedly, well, the next time we're going to strike them on land, and we know where their roots are and where they live. I mean, that sounds like an invasion of another country, and with no consultation with Congress. And I'm not holding a brief for Congress here, but we're proxies for the American people. And if the president's going to take our country into war with another country, which, by the way, isn't a patsy. They've got air defenses and the military, and without any consultation with anybody outside of this small circle of people, that's a really serious problem. The founders of this country on August 17th, 1787, in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention, debated the war power. And there were some who said the president should have the power because he's a commander in chief. You can't have a committee run a war. But other people said, wait a minute, one of the things we don't want is what they did in Europe, where kings and princes and emperors would willy-nilly take their countries into war for whatever reason. So they compromised and said Congress has the power to declare war, and the president's the commander in chief during wartime. Now, Congress has abdicated its responsibility, in my view, pretty substantially over the years, but there's still, George W. Bush came to the Congress about Iraq. Lord knows we had the Tonkin Gulf Resolution.
Yeah.
Which
sir,
was
to
not
that point, they've had a Senate War Powers Act. It's, been close, right? One away. I mean, can the Senate not bring the War Powers Act every day they're in session? Because these conditions seem to be changing within real time, but the Senate seems to be behind
we should.
it.
And Tim Kaine of Virginia has been a real bear on this. He used to work closely with McCain, and he's brought it up about Venezuela. So far, the Republicans in the Senate have basically knocked it down.
That's what I wonder, sir. Is there room there now, right? It feels like every 24 hours the tone changes on all these things, right? And maybe it'll be SignalGate, maybe it'll be some new information. But I feel like the War Powers Act kind of gets kicked down. The can keeps getting kicked, but the issue keeps coming around where Trump seems to be asking for forgiveness, not for permission. So you guys may be voting on a War Powers Act after there are already strikes on Venezuela.
I couldn't agree more, and it's one more abdication. I mean, this year has been a long series of abdications by the Congress of its constitutional responsibility to be a check and balance. And hopefully this may be a bridge too far for my Republican colleagues. I gave a speech in the spring that said, what will it take? Maybe it's an incipient war that none of us have had consultation, or the American people certainly haven't been brought into the conversation. Maybe that's what it will take. But it's about time, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, maybe it takes an independent senator from the state of Maine in the spirit of Chamberlain, because I think you're in a really important position, sir, right now to be able to press on these issues and others. It feels like there's movement among your Republican colleagues to flex their their accountability and their responsibility. And as this unfolds, I hope you'll come back and keep us updated and continue to hold the line. I don't want to let you go without asking you what we always do. This is a lot of rough stuff here, but you're a source of light and positivity. You're a great role model, especially for so many independents who want to step up and run for office. I want to end the show in my conversation with you with something good.
Something good, oh, something sweet. Feel the fire.
And I'll start if I can. I don't know if you're a fan of Sabrina Carpenter, sir, but the pop singer takes no shit. And the White House used one of her songs in a video to support mass deportations. And she wrote back on social media and said, "This video is evil and disgusting. Do not ever involve me or my music to benefit your inhumane agenda." The White House, of course, came back and wants to get in a fight with Sabrina Carpenter, which I think they will lose, especially if they have any daughters or sons who are music fans. But I want to just celebrate it because it's someone who's outside of politics standing up for what's right, in my view. And I think we need more of those folks to say this is inhumane. We don't talk to people that way. We don't disrespect people that way. And leadership can come from anywhere. So in this moment, especially given her reach to young people, and this might involve them more in politics, I want to say Sabrina Carpenter and her strong stand is something good. Senator Angus King, what do you got, sir? What's something good today?
Well, I think something good for me is coming out of Thanksgiving, because we're always talking about what divides us and how tough it is and the politics and all of that kind of thing. We had 21 people at our Thanksgiving dinner, and they were family, close friends, and we just every now and then we got to step back and say what do we have good in this country, and the answer is everything. We're the envy of the world. Do you ever think about this? We talk about the border and immigration. It's pretty good to be a country that people want to break into.
Yeah.
I've been to countries around the world where people want to break out. And so we need to every now and then take a deep breath and say, what have we got that's good here? And Thanksgiving is a good example of families coming together, people being able to talk. And I'll tell you what, our Thanksgiving dinner with those 21 people was one of the blessed events for me. And I think we need to stop and recognize those kinds of things every now and then.
Well, thank you for that, sir. That is something good. We are always going to stop and recognize your leadership, especially in this moment where so many independents are stepping up. There are now at least 4 independents running for the U.S. Senate that are veterans that we likely will see more. So I hope by this time next year, we will have more independents to help you create an independent fulcrum that can flex, especially in moments like this. But you're leading the way. You're setting a positive example. Your tone is so important, not just in Maine and in America, but to the world. I'm grateful for you joining us and all your vigilance. I hope you'll continue to speak out strongly and join us again on the show soon, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you. Good to see you, man.
You too. And better luck next time to my Knicks against the Celtics. I think long term, I think we got you this year. Without Jason Tatum, I think we got you this year. All right, folks, we are daily now. You heard this great conversation with Senator Angus King. We're continuing to bring folks from all political backgrounds and putting you at the center of the conversations that matter, bringing light to contrast to heat. If you like this conversation, hit the subscribe button. We've got a big week ahead. I will be on News Nation for my regular segment later today to talk politics and national security with Colin McShane. Might be on CNN, might be on MS Now, but we will continue to stay on top of this every single day. The country, you hear, is divided, but we think that's less and less so by the day because independents like Senator Angus King and others are working to change that. So if you're among the now 50% of Americans who are independent, this is your show, this is your community. Even if you're independent curious, join us because our independent movement is hope for the future. Country over people over politics, light over heat. And we're bringing hope that is the oxygen of democracy. If you enjoyed this episode with Senator King, please share it far and wide, especially because he is an independent. The voice of independents are critical at this moment where the Republicans and Democrats seem to be chewing each other apart. Invite others to declare their independence and stay vigilant out there, folks, especially this week because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant and we're all in this together. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. Thank you for tuning in to Independent Americans. We will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode. Until next time, stay vigilant, America.
Powered by Righteous Media.